to Overtime Hockey Talk. My name is Mark Paul, and my co-host Justin Baker and I, joining me, of course, via Skype, because we are being responsible sons of bitches by not sitting in the same studio with each other. That and my wife took the other half of our studio for her home office now. So, Justin, welcome in from the digital world.
Why, thanks for having me, Mark. I'm so happy to be on this show. It's like every radio guest I hear on XM,
right?
Satellite NHL radio. It's like, oh, thanks for having me, and it's always wanted to say that, so I got to. Fantastic.
Hey, welcome in. Hope you feel right at home.
I certainly
We'll see
do.
how
Thank
our
you.
chemistry is together. See if we can figure this out. Okay, well, since there's no NHL happening and there's very little news, of course, there's a trade freeze and all that. So with that said, we decided to, just continue what we have been doing really all throughout the year as, things have been slower. We just kind of felt like doing extra episodes in a week. We've been doing top tens, and we have two teams coming up that I think a lot of people will be interested in listening to our list, but also two teams that have been either recently or all time have won lots of Stanley Cups. That is the Montreal Canadiens and the Colorado Quebec Nordiques Avalanche deal. Basically, all the Patrick Wa's.
All the Patrick Wa's.
All the Patrick Wa's. So with that said, we're going to start this episode, Montreal Canadiens. Next episode that you will hear will be the Nordiques and Avalanche. And with that said, we always start with our just missed. Also, if you have missed any of these previous top tens and you want to go back and find your team, we've done almost every team at this point. Chicago, the Islanders, the Kings, Senators, Jets, Panthers, Oilers, Flyers, Leafs, Sharks, so on and so forth. We've knocked out quite a few of these. There aren't too many of them left. We've definitely done more than 70% of the league at this point. So if you're interested, go back, listen to those. You can subscribe to the show. You'll find all those episodes available there for you. And now we move to our just missed players. Justin, who's on your just missed for the Montreal Canadiens?
Okay, yeah, this was tough. I looked at this list, and there's just a lot of quality players.
A couple of good players that played for the Canadiens, eh?
Yeah, they had a few. So the first person on my just missed was Bernie Geoffrion.
He also is the first person on my just missed.
All right, wonderful. What can't be said about a guy whose nickname is Boom Boom? He's got to get pretty close in that aspect. Another person on my list, Andrei Markov, just a rock-solid defenseman for so many years with the Canadiens.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, no Stanley Cups to his name during his tenure. And I believe also, I think it was last year, there were talks of him coming back from the KHL. Yeah. Ultimately, I think they just didn't want to pay him the money he wanted, or I can't remember what it was. But
third all-time defensive scorer. Actually tied for second with Guy Lapointe. Granted, Markov played 213 more games, but still tied. Yeah,
not admirable. And last on my list is a goaltender, of course, because we got to hit every zone, and that is George Hainsworth, who in about 300-ish games put up 75 shutouts for the Canadiens, which, if you really look at the numbers, that's one almost every 4 games.
Yeah, that's impressive. It was during a time he was their goaltender in like the 20s.
Yeah, from 26 to all the way to 1933, and then of course went to the Maple Leafs and finished out his career there. But
yeah, his worst goals against average as a Montreal Canadien was 2.42.
Yeah, his best goals against was the season before at .92.
.92
with 22 shutouts, won every other game that season.
Justin, think about this. He went 22-7 that year. He won every single game by shutting out the other team.
Insane.
That is
just crazy.
That is insane. Wow. Montreal did win the Stanley Cup that year too. Or no, they didn't actually. Course. No, they didn't. How did they not?
They did.
No, they did. They won the Stanley Cup twice with Hainsworth. The other guy that I thought about including on this list, because he is listed on the NHL's top 100, was George Vezina, who he, obviously the Vezina Trophy is named after him. His stats not quite where you'd like them to be in the top 10, in my opinion. Great that he has a trophy named after him, but I mean, in reality, Patrick Waugh could have a trophy named after him. It's just he isn't old as dirt. Well, that's mean because I'm sure all those people are dirt now, but going down a bad road.
Savage.
Okay, all right. So you're just missed. I also had Ken Dryden, another goaltender on my just missed. Obviously, very talented, maybe the most talented goalie to ever play for the Canadiens, but just kind of he didn't last long enough. He didn't play in the NHL long enough for me to be on that list. And then I have Guy Lapointe. Same idea as Andrei Markov, just second highest defensive scorer, kind of deserves his name tossed out there. Okay, now we're into our top 10. Let's go number 10. Who do you have?
All right, number 10 for me is Ken Dryden.
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
the goalie makes
let's
it.
Throw him in there. 6 Stanley Cups, 5 Vezinas, the Calder, the Conn Smythe. I mean, just miraculous numbers. Granted, he did have just a stacked team around him, but you look at all of his numbers when he played for the Canadiens, and while it was a short career, he retired at the age of 31, 32 maybe. His numbers were just insanely good during his tenure.
Yeah, he certainly deserves to have his name considered. Definitely on the list of top goalies for the Montreal Canadiens, for sure. I have another goaltender as my number 10. I have Carey Price as number 10.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, he did not make my list, unfortunately.
All-time winner all-time leader in wins, games played, and he's right up there in shutouts. He's got 48 shutouts. I know that there's a lot of discussion about him currently, whether or not he can continue what he's doing and how good he actually is. But he was spectacular for a while. I still think he has some left in the tank. I mean, he's going to win at least 400 games with the Canadiens, if not more. So I think that Carey Price definitely deserves to be on this list and will be on your list when all is said and done. Once the guy retires.
Yeah, I would think by the time he retires, and he's one of those goaltenders that's unfortunate because because of his contract, he's probably going to be a Canadian for life unless, he gets one of those buyout clauses that maybe, the CBA introduces in the next few years or something. But even then, I still don't think they'll buy him out. But unless the Canadiens can do something here, maybe the next 5 years to turn it around, I just don't see him getting a Stanley Cup, unfortunately.
Yep. And, one thing that I haven't really considered is, will the cap go down next year? Oh, baby.
Yeah, it's
going to be interesting.
That's scary to think about. Yeah.
Okay. So Carey Price, my number 10. Certainly, I agree. Ken Dryden he does have the trophies to back it up. I think Carey Price nowadays playing 30 teams, when he was in his prime, whereas Ken Dryden's playing against 6 teams in the league that were horrible, and then really just had to beat the Bruins every year. That's all I'll say about that. You're number 9.
All right, number 9 for me is Henry Richard, recently deceased. Rest in peace. Little brother to Maurice Richard, but while he wasn't the goal scorer that his big brother was, he in my opinion was better at every other aspect of the game. Obviously played center. The all-time winningest in terms of Stanley Cup championships. That all
time, not just for the Canadiens, all time. 11 Stanley Cups this guy won.
Insane. And for a guy back in that day too, you think the way people were throwing elbows, slashing right at 5'7", just insane that he was able to be so successful. Over 1,000 points in about 1,250 games played. So quite the career, and also a guy you could probably add to your collection because he has 2 Stanley Cup winning goals.
He does have 2 Stanley Cup winning goals, and I don't have him. I actually have Boom Boom Jeffrey on. No. I'm sorry. I do have Henri Richard.
Oh, okay, nice.
I'm literally he's looking at me right now. His face is my computer right there. Yep.
Beautiful.
Number 16. Yep. that's him. Other thing, Henri Richard, very interesting, though, is that he never won any kind of real trophy. Like, he won the Masterton in 73, 74, which was kind of to say, hey, thanks for playing. Like, he won that trophy when he was 37 years old.
Well, there you go.
But Boom Boom Geoffrion actually won a Hart Trophy. He won league MVP, and he missed our list. Like, there are not, I don't think so far, I don't think there's been any teams that have had an MVP not be in the list. I'd have to go back and look. But I think that at least between the two of us, there has been no one who is the MVP. And the Canadiens, for my money, I believe that there are two that won't be on our list that did win the MVP. Do you know who the other one is?
Oh, that's a good question.
It is a goalie.
Why don't you? Oh, yeah, Jose Theodore.
Theodore. Theodore, right. I believe.
Theodore.
Henri Richard was actually my number 9 as well, so that's an easy one. I'll toss out my number 8. I have another goaltender at my number 8, and that goalie is none other than Patrick Roy.
Okay, he is my number 7 on my list.
There we go. Yep. He played at a time for the Canadiens when goal scoring was mostly through the roof. Maybe not the absolute highest scoring years. He skipped out on he only played one game in 84, 85. I think it was like 82, 83 or 81, 82. That was the highest scoring year ever, where there was over 8 goals per game. But still, all throughout the 80s and early 90s, goal scoring was through the roof. And, he's still like 89, 90. He manages a 912 save percentage. Numbers that other people did not have. He, of course, won 2 Stanley Cups. I think these 2 Stanley Cups are far more significant because he won them these Stanley Cups. In my opinion, he without Patrick Roy, the Montreal Canadiens, they definitely don't win the 86 Cup because they weren't really even supposed to be there. And
oh no, absolutely.
And Patrick Roy takes them all the way. And then, of course, in '93, they beat teams every time that we're supposed to beat them. Like the Quebec Nordiques, when they beat them in the first round, they just kept beating them in overtime. I think that series went to 7 games, or 6 games. But I think the Nordiques were favored. I mean, that's a Nordiques team that had Peter Forsberg. Peter Forsberg. They had Matt Sundin, Joe Sakic. That team was nasty. That 92-93 team. Yeah, that team was unbelievable. And Patrick Roy manages to shut them out. And they roll all the way to the final. They beat Gretzky, and they win the cup. So for my money, those are probably the 2 years where the Canadiens shouldn't have won the cup, and they won the cup because of Patrick Roy.
Yeah, I would agree. You look at his cups he won in Colorado, and he wasn't the reason they won, but he was a reason why they won, right? He was part of that core group that they needed to get over the hump. But yeah, like you said,
he did win the Conn Smythe in 2001.
Yeah, that's true. He did.
3 Conn Smythes for that son of jeez.
Yeah, the most ever. I will say, though, on the flip side, one of the happiest moments of my life, and watch it on replay a lot, was seeing him get shelled 10-1 against my Detroit Red Wings, and then he gets pulled. And favorite moment was, when he finally makes a save, and the crowd his home crowd starts cheering. Yeah. And, of course, that was the end of it at that point. But, that's why he comes in at number 7 for me.
Let me just throw this one other thing out there. Starting from 85-86, his rookie season, he was 9th in the Vezina, 10th, 8th, 1st, 2nd, 1st, 6th, 3rd, and then the only year he wasn't top 10 in Vezina trophy voting was 94-95. That was the shortened year with the lockout anyways, so it's kind of a weird year. Do you know who won the Vezina that year?
No, not off the top of my head.
Jim frickin' Carey.
Oh, yes, that's right.
The freaking mask won the freaking
mask.
So
beautiful.
Okay, So he's my number 8. Who's your number 8?
My number 8 is Howie Morenz.
All right. I have Howie Morenz significantly higher, and I'll tell you why when I get to him. But I'll let you explain why he's at your number 7.
Yeah. So again, I think, when you look at his career, he did play, very, very early on when there weren't a lot of teams, right? You talked about it, a little bit we talked about it with George Hainsworth back in the 20s and early 30s. But I will say, for a guy who won 3 Hart trophies, it's kind of hard to put him this low. I really wrestled with that a bit because he was, in my opinion, like the first superstar in hockey, and he was that for the Montreal Canadiens. And obviously, we talked about it. He led the league in scoring twice, 3 MVPs, and he led his Canadiens in scoring 7 times. So, I mean, he was one of the better players in the league at that time, if not maybe one of the best, top 3, I would say. So, again, a little hard to put him, this low on the list, but I just honestly, the era he played in just kind of knocked him down a peg or two, in my opinion.
For some of the time that he played in the NHL, there actually was 10 teams.
That's true. I will give you that.
But for his rookie season, there was only 4 teams in the NHL. We'll get to Howie Morenz a little bit more, and I'll tell you why I have him a little bit higher. So your number 7 is Patrick Waugh. I have Larry Robinson as my number 7. Not necessarily a defenseman who was putting up huge points, but Larry Robinson was an absolute force, probably the best, I guess you'd say, stay-at-home defenseman of all time. He won 2 Norris trophies, and he also won the Conn Smythe in 77-78 and won the Stanley Cup 6 times.
Yeah, and you talk about a stay-at-home guy, right? We don't talk about plus-minus that much, but in 1977, he finishes with a plus 120. I mean...
Yeah, dude, he's a plus 722 over his career.
Yeah.
And for it, we're talking, this is a guy who, every year he was just probably one of the best all-around defensemen ever to play.
Yeah, and I would say if it weren't for that pesky guy in the Bruins B, he probably would have a few more Norris trophies on his shelf.
Yeah, absolutely. And even into the 80s, he was still putting up, 85, 86, at 34 years old, he put up 82 points. So maybe erasing my thought of a stay-at-home defenseman. But he was just a guy who could bruise you. Like, he was your ideal 70s defenseman.
Yeah, he was a big fella, and they didn't call him Big Bird for nothing. So
that's right. Okay, so he's my number 7. Who's your number 6?
Number 6 for me is Jacques Plante.
Oh, all right. We're on the same page on him.
All right, yeah. Many considering him the greatest goalie in Montreal Canadiens history, and I would agree with that, obviously, because I have no other goalies higher on this list. He is the leader in games played, I believe,
no, not anymore. Carey Price is.
That's right.
Yeah, Carey Price has basically broken all of his records. The difference is that, Carey Price is 348, 250, and 48. Jacques Plante is 314, 133, and 58.
Yeah, not too shabby. Not too shabby.
Oh, I'm sorry. The 58 and 48 are shutouts, so let's ignore my stupidity there.
Yeah, but what can you say about a guy that captured 6 Vezinas, I believe it was, during his tenure with the Canadiens, and then one with St. Louis at the ripe old age of 40 years old. But this guy, again, just there's not much that already has been said. The guy's probably the greatest goaltender in Canadiens history, and I think if maybe Carey Price could muscle up a few Stanley Cups, he could easily cement himself in that conversation, but unfortunately not going to happen for him. So,
hey, what can you do? It also, there's just so many more games being played now too.
True.
Okay, my number 6 is Jacques Plante. Into the top 5. Who do you have at number 5?
Yeah, number 5 for me is Larry Robinson.
Okay, all right, you got him a little higher.
Yeah, a little bit higher. I just loved his all-around game, the way he was able to still be so so defensive minded while still putting up great numbers offensively. I mean, we talked about it. He had, let me count it here to start his career off. I mean, he ran through, his first full season. He ran off with 26 points, okay, but then after that it was 61, 40, 85, 65, 61, 75. So he exploded. That
right, he gets to play with Guy Lafleur sending him the puck. That's in an era where goalies began to fade.
Exactly, but
and people ran to the WHA.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, you forget about Bobby Hall and Gordy there, but yeah, again, his all-around game to me was just so crucial to this team, and got him a few Stanley Cups because of it.
Absolutely, and played over 1,200 games for the Montreal Canadiens. That is second to only Henri Richard.
All right.
My number 5 is another defenseman. That is Doug Harvey. Doug Harvey, defenseman during the 50s and 60s when Maurice Richard, guys are talking about him playing on those 50s teams, all saying he was the best defenseman that they ever played with. I think that Doug Harvey's maybe one of the most underrated defensemen of all time. I don't think that like regular people know who he is. Of course, everyone knows who Bobby Orr is, but he was considered the offensive defenseman of his day. And you don't have to look any further than this. Starting the 51-52 season until 57-58, that's 7 years in a row, he was on the first All-Star line, like first All-Star team there. And he won the Norris 7 times and was in the top, was second for the Norris one other year. So, I mean, the guy was just unbelievable, has tons of accolades, and played in an era where goal scoring was actually the lowest it's ever been. Maybe other than the late 90s, early 2000s could give it a run for its money, but those in the 50s, guys just didn't put up huge points. I think that was just a matter of technology in the game. The sticks weren't very good, but also just the way that people played. It wasn't a showboaty kind of game. So guys weren't scoring a ton of goals, but he put up a lot of points compared to other defensemen that played at the same time. So.
Yeah, I would not disagree with that choice. That's why for me he comes in at number 4.
Beauty.
Yeah, and you talked about it. He was an offensive defenseman before there was really that term, and Bobby Orr kind of popularized that. You think about this, right? He played on a power play, and especially when you say goal scoring is a little bit lower, but he quarterbacks a power play that features Jean Beliveau, the Rocket Richard, and Boom Boom Geoffrion.
Bye.
Yeah, see ya. So, not too shabby. Not too shabby.
I think there was a chance that there would be like 4 or 5 Hart Trophy winners on the ice at the same time for the Montreal Canadiens at one point.
Yeah, insane.
That's pretty crazy to think about. Okay, we're my number 4, and this is just I think we're going to have some pretty similar players other than one here. My number 4 is Guy Lafleur.
Okay, my number 3.
Yeah, the flower drops in there, and he is the all-time leading point getter and has the most assists, second most goals, only to Maurice Rocket Richard. And on every list that I went out and looked, I like to do a little bit of research on other people's lists and kind of see where they drop him and other players. And he was always lower than the few other guys that I have him ahead, other than one. Like definitely lower than Maurice Richard and Jean Beliveau. And so, I thought, okay, he has the most points. Why is he so much lower? I think it's based on the era that he played in. He also played with Beliveau a little bit. They kind of overlap a little bit. But Lafleur, I don't think that he was as vocal as the other two guys, and so I think that's why he really appears lower on people's lists, because for all intents and purposes he was as good, if not a better player anyways. But I put him at number 4. I think the team around him was also unbelievably stacked in the 70s there when they won 5 in a row. So I definitely think that helped him.
Yeah, not disagreeing with that at all. That's why he's at number 3, like you said, below the 2 guys that always just seem to pop up ahead of him on lists.
All right. Okay, so that's all right. Now we get to Howie Morenz, who is my number 3.
Morenz.
Howie Morenz is my number 3, and I am basing this on this fact that he was voted the best player to play in the first half of the century. So out of anybody to play from, like 1918, the first year of the league, to 1950, he is considered the best player to play in that time frame. And I think that's speaking volumes, because there were some other very good players that won a lot of trophies. He did win 3 Hart trophies. He won the cup 3 times. He put up big points, especially considering the era that he played in. Before Maurice Rocket Richard was putting up his 50 goals, he did have 40 goals in just 44 games. So it definitely had the best scoring season before everyone got crazy about 50 goals. I don't know what it was about 50 goals. For some reason, NHL hockey people love those like exact numbers, like 60 goals. We got to get to 60. Is like 59 really any worse than like 60? Not really, not really. But right. we put that on there. Whereas in baseball, it became like, 61. That was the big number because that was the record for home runs. But it seems like hockey, for whatever reason, likes those round numbers. I don't know why. But he goes in there, I think, being the best player to play in the first half of the century there, gives him the nod for me, especially since, we tend to ignore those guys that played when we really have no video of them at all, and a lot of it is just based on stats and what we can read.
All right. Beautiful.
All right. Let's go. Your number 2.
Yeah. This could be a toss-up, but I have a Jean Beliveau at number 2.
Okay. I think most lists had Jean Beliveau at number 2. And so then obviously you have Maurice Rocket Richard at number 1. I actually have them flip-flopped, but I want to hear your reasoning for Beliveau then Richard.
Yeah. The biggest reason that obviously you look at Beliveau, he has, more Hart trophies. He did serve as captain, for 5 of the Stanley Cups of the 10 he won, right? So
and is like widely regarded as the best captain of all time in Montreal Canadiens history. Absolutely.
For me, it was just the historical aspect. I think the presence that he's, Rocket Richard has always kind of been looked at as the Babe Ruth of hockey, right? Babe Ruth obviously didn't hit singles. He was a home run guy, much like Rocket Richard was considered a goal scorer. And he was the first guy to put up 50 in a season. He was the first guy to score 500 goals. And, until he was passed by Gordie Howe in 63, he was that guy that, held that high standard like Babe Ruth. Like that's the pinnacle, like, you have to get there to be one of the best players of all time. And I think, he kind of set that precedence, for just being a goal scorer that I think, we don't see too many of them this day in terms of guys that are just really pure goal scorers. And he was really the first to be regarded as, just a filthy goal scorer. I mean, he had a backhand as good as his forehand. And, there's a reason we call him the Rocket now. So he had just a fiery shot. So.
Yeah, and I actually do think that there were so he has the 1 Hart trophy. Ironically, not the year he scored 50 goals. It was the year he scored 45, which is his second best season. It took him 10 more games to do that. In the year he scored 50 goals, 39 of them were even strength goals. That's incredible.
Absolutely.
The year he scored 45 goals, 10 of them were game-winning goals. And then in 55-56, he scored 38 goals. 12 of those were game-winning goals. So the guy was clutch. I'm wondering if some of the reason he didn't win the Hart was because he was an asshole. Like people in the media, I think there were quite a few people that didn't like him. he obviously, all about basically the riot that he helped start remember when he got suspended during the playoffs by the commissioner, and a huge riot happened in Montreal, and away we go there. Not too many players that cause people to riot when they get suspended. Pretty crazy. I have Jean Beliveau ahead of him. He does have more Stanley Cups. He won the Hart one extra time. He led the league in points. He also won a Conn Smythe trophy as well for top player in the playoffs. I think that Maurice Rocket Richard is I think a lot of people want to compare like an Ovechkin now. We look at him and we compare him to Maurice Rocket Richard, which I think is a fair comparison, especially when you compare Sidney Crosby with their battle, and Sidney Crosby has a lot more of the overall trophies, whereas Ovechkin just wins all the Rocket Richard trophies. Ironically, the Richard trophies, he wins them all. I do think that Richard was more or less he had a one element to him. He could score goals, which is a great element to have. But I think that, and he was certainly fiery and aggressive and all that. But I do think that Jean Beliveau is the best overall roundabout player that has ever played for the Montreal Canadiens. I do think that he's the best hockey player to ever play for them. Maurice Rochechard, best goal scorer to ever play for the Montreal Canadiens. Not a bad thing to be. That's why I have Beliveau at number 1.
All right. Well, hey, I honestly can't argue with your decision. I mean, either one of these guys, in my opinion, would be worthy of a number 1 for all time.
All right. Well, there's our top 10 Montreal Canadiens. Let us know what you thought. Hit us on Twitter at OT Hockey Talk. We'll just continue bringing you these top 10s for as long as we need to. And hopefully the NHL season will get started sometime. Hopefully we get to see the completion of this season. I'd be quite disappointed if the rest of the season got canceled. I'm hoping, Justin. Before we sign off, actually, this is what we'll do. We'll open the next show with our idea for how the NHL can start back up with a bang and move into the playoffs somehow. We'll have that on our next show. Until then, we'll talk to you guys very soon. Stay safe out there. Distance yourself from all those nasty motherfuckers. All right, we'll talk to you guys soon.